Media and Communications Coordinator for the Virginia Beach Cultural Affairs Department. I am joined today by a very special guest, artist Anne Dushanko-Dobek. She is a conceptual artist whose installations, video, and works on paper focus on issues of social justice and/or the environment. So Anne, thank you for joining me today.
I am so excited because when I received a phone call from Nina Goodale in January, um, Parallel Migrations 25, which has been installed at Lake Lawson since August of 2019, was due to come down. And she offered me an opportunity for Parallel Migrations to have an encore performance. So that's what we've been doing. Um, They very graciously just said that yes, because of the pandemic, I did not have to physically move out of state. Thank you. No, between over boundaries, particularly if you live in New Jersey. So, Parallel Migrations, which is a 3/4 of a mile, give or take, installation that I've been doing these for over 18 years, and I've been doing them globally. So the installation at Lake Lawson has over 1,000 butterflies, or did originally before the hurricane came along, climate change. Um, and so we have refurbished it, and tomorrow people are invited to come and walk the walk and take some photos and look at the butterflies that mimic those in the OML forest in Mexico.
So, and we've actually had, some of you who are viewing this video may have been at our first ever sketch crawl at Lake Lawson, Lake Smith at the end of last year, where you came out and saw those butterflies and sketched them. And as you may have seen, like Anne said, they were in need of a replenishment, which just recently happened. So there are some new butterflies that have migrated down to the park. So I just wanted to ask you, Anne, so what exactly is parallel migrations and what do the butterflies represent?
The butterflies, actually, they represent not only the climate change and the species loss in terms of insect populations. The insect populations have decreased about 50%, according to a large group of global scientists who keep track of those things. And so I use parallel migrations, and specifically the monarch butterfly, as a metaphor for species loss and also for crossing borders, perilous journeys, because the monarch butterfly goes back and forth, but also 14 million people around the world are crossing borders looking for sanctuary, safety, and a place to live, because wherever they were or are um, isn't there anymore. Uh, Folks tend to think of that as people um, who are not from this country. But the number of people who are not going to ever be able to go back to their homes in Texas or California because of the fires and the floods and other areas of the country where all sorts of climatic variations, parts of some cities, New Orleans is one, Miami is another, and parts of Virginia Beach probably will be underwater within the next 2 decades. It's not a maybe, it's climate change. It's real.
Right. And both from this project, and I mean, from the very beginning, your artist statement, you mention it. What is it? Has social justice and issues of the environment, has that been a lifelong project and something that you've been passionate about? When did that come about and how did it come about in your life?
Alex, you asked me how I came to be doing so many things that have to do with the environment. And essentially, okay, what image are you seeing right now? The beetle?
I see the beetle.
Okay, well, I'll start over again. Alex, you asked me what motivated me to have such an interest in insects and the environment. And most people, if you ask them what they have from their childhood that they saved, what did they tuck away in a trunk, a favorite book, a doll, a stuffed toy, a car. Well, I have a beetle. Now, yeah,
That's
I
unique.
have a beetle. I have a beetle because one, I grew up in rural South Jersey and I was collecting insects because there really was not a whole lot more to do. And there were no pesticides. Fortunately, I had a cousin who was a second or third cousin. We would see her occasionally, and she saw what I was doing and sent me uh, butterfly pins, a little book on collecting and mounting insects. And then, about a year or two later, she sent me some beetles from a trip she had taken to the Amazon rainforest doing research. And she influenced me in so many ways. One, my father was appalled when he saw what she sent me. Two, he was appalled that she had made it clear that she wasn't getting interested in marrying anytime soon. And three, that she had not been content to be a gym teacher and had become a biologist. This was horrifying. Now, even though I was only 9 years old, I thought it was wonderful. And I just quietly clutched it to my brain and realized that I could do things if I just was as smiling and slippery as she was. Nothing illegal, but she wasn't going to play the game. So I have this beetle, and I also have a drawing of this beetle, which is a harlequin beetle, which was a gift to me from someone who had a private insect zoo in Costa Rica. Because as a result of my cousin's Ruth's support, I became interested in the interactions between climate and insects and animals and our lives. And the result is that I also practice my drawing skills, which made me invaluable years later. And so, what I want to show you next are two pieces. One is that all of my work for the past 20 years, probably close to 30, has definitely used, I have used the image of the monarch butterfly as this metaphor for all of these journeys and for all of the things that are happening to the environment. However, in 1996, there was this article in the New York Times, and the article discussed the fact that there had been a major die off of millions of monarch butterflies in the forest of central Mexico, which is where the butterflies uh, migrate to uh, every year, and then they come back. But the ones that come back are the progeny, the grandchildren and grandchildren of the ones who originally go to Mexico. The problem there was three things. One was the fact that there were holes in the canopy. Two, the holes in the canopy were due to illegal logging. And three, the illegal logging was because of political corruption. And these things tend to be with us all over the world. No one is isolated. Um, so there were millions of butterflies dead. And I was thinking about that. And I was also thinking about the impact of all of these things, the climate change, the corruption, the environmental devastation on people. And I decided at that point that I was going to use the image of the monarch butterfly to address both environmental and social justice issues. But there's always real source material, and it starts with the New York Times. And the next piece I wanted to share with you is a piece that also illustrates some of the things that are happening now, but have always happened. And that is trying to figure out what is illusion and what is reality. And this particular piece is approximately 6 inches by, it's actually about 6 by 6. And what you're looking at is a spreading board. These are the boards that entomologists use, who are people who collect insects. They use them to spread a specimen, and they hold it down with little thin pieces of rice paper, and they hold it down with butterfly pins so that it is, when it's preserved, it's in a pristine shape. And half of this is real and half is painted. And another piece is painted and cut out and put on. So sometimes for exhibits, I will have a half dozen of these on exhibit. And the question for the viewer is, which butterfly is real, which one is fake? Which board is really wood, which one is fake? Which pins have I drawn or painted, which ones are real? And what I've done just to bring this concept home is, on these papers, I have put headlines from different New York Times articles that deal with issues dealing with the environment, migrants, and immigrants. So what this is going to tell you is all the work you see is multi-referential. It all has real-time sources, and that whatever you're seeing, I'm suggesting that you need to look beyond the surface, because half of the time people are arguing over which one is the real butterfly, which is the photograph of the butterfly, which one is the painting of the butterfly. Now, while we're looking at this, you might want to go and say, well, why did she draw a butterfly or paint the butterfly? And it's not a perfect specimen. All of my specimens, people or I find, and many butterflies die and are washed up on the coast of New Jersey when they're migrating, because they get caught by a wave, or in this case, this one I think got bitten by a bird. So it has chunks out of it. And in the fall, I will frequently go to one of the beaches, particularly Long Beach Island, and I will retrieve these from the sand. But people who live down there, if they see a dead one and they see its carcass, they very generously send them to me, and it's just a great gift. Not everybody's idea of a great gift, but it is. So what you're seeing here really encompasses what my work is about. It's getting people to have conversations, to look at issues, to see what happens in the environment. So,
I think
and
I think that's so interesting. It's just from the start of the presentation here, I just think it's interesting. You know, some people are influenced by the Beatles, but who knows which ones?
well, there are 3,500 species of beetles last I checked. The butterflies are having a much harder time. Um, I had a little paper here with exactly the latest numbers. I looked it up. Um, and that is, there are 17,000 butterfly species, and 19% of them in this country alone are in danger of extinction. So if we want, we can take a look. What was your next question?
Sure, no, go ahead. No, that would be great.
Um, because years later, I was very fortunate to have some projects funded by the Geraldine R. Dodge Foundation, and they funded me to go to the rainforest of Costa Rica and to work on butterfly caterpillar research. And I thought that you folks might like to see some of the images from a presentation I do called Artist in the Rainforest. Because while I was there, and the first time was probably about 15 or 20 years ago, it was really clear to me that a lot was happening. And if you look at this image of the rainforest, you can see that it's so dense because of the humidity, because it has so much rain, and because the base is protected by all the foliage of the trees above. Everything is encrusted and is constantly growing. The lodges where the scientist and I were staying, they had teams of people going around trimming 12 to 15 inches off. And a month later, they were trimming 12 or 15 inches off again. Uh, the trimming back where you're living in a rainforest is similar to the thrill of having to keep removing snow from your sidewalk in the dead of winter in the northeastern or northwestern United States. While I was there, what was really exciting was that all the artists, all of the scientists were sharing what they did. And at any given time, there are approximately 10 to 15 scientists who visit this site and they have ongoing research on everything: soil, air, gas, butterflies, bees, and frogs. And they're very generously. So here we have a two-toed tree sloth. And the advantage of sloths is that they are really, really, really slow. So you can see it. And before there, when I was there were no cell phones. So therefore, you had to go back and tell folks where, with a location, a trail marker, they could find it. And sure enough, it was just still hanging there. Maybe it moved 2 inches. Now, the opposite with this tiny poison dart frog is that frog is no bigger than my thumbnail. And if you don't walk very, very, very quietly and be swift with your camera, that frog is gone. You will not find it again because it's so tiny and it slips under a leaf. And speaking of leaves, there are caterpillars, and these caterpillars look like they belong in Japanese anime because they're so cartoon-like, they have such incredible patterning, and they will all turn into either moths or butterflies. Frequently, when people go and say, "Oh, we have to kill off all those caterpillars," and I will look at them and smile and say, you're killing a baby butterfly because caterpillars are infant butterflies. One of my jobs, you ask what my jobs were in the rainforest. Um, when we found caterpillars, you had to fill out a sheet. So if you think about, um, keeping track of where you are and what you did, etc., um, you fill out a sheet and you describe the specimen. You put it in a plastic bag. You put all this information that you can at the time, as well as you put some of the plant matter that the species was on. One of my jobs was not only helping to do all of this and search for the caterpillars, but as the artist, I was encouraged to be the team photographer. And I can tell you that getting a caterpillar to line itself up on the rib of a leaf so that you count all the legs and photograph it and keep it in focus before it eats the plant makes supermodels really easy to work with, because if it eats the leaf before you finish, guess what you have to do? Alex, what do you think you have to do?
I don't know. What do you have to do?
Well, you have to put the caterpillar back in its plastic sack, take the sheet, make a copy of where it was on which trail, get your rubber boots on, and go clogging out there to find some more. You're going shopping, you're going to the supermarket, and you're going to bring back some more and then see if you can persuade this creature to line up so you get dorsal, lateral views, and you still have the food source evident. So you have to move faster than it eats. Very quickly, the next two images, um, demonstrate why artists are still valuable. On the left, you have a photograph. On the right, you have the painting. On the left here, you have and that's a heliconia or a strata. And on this side, you have a tree totally encased in bromeliads, which are uh, plants which have their roots in the air and they get their nutrients from the air. However, when you look at the on the left and you see this big tree, it just looks like a huge mass. So my job was to find a tree where there was a smaller one, obviously, where there was a bromeliad on the side, where I could help to define the shape of the leaves and the interior of the plant more clearly. And then sometimes they want black and white line drawings. So you're all ready to go to the forest and help out catch caterpillars, bats, bees, butterflies, peccaries. There are all these cool things there.
See, and it's interesting. So something that I wrote down, while you were going over everything with the rainforest, and just in talking with you about your experiences and your passions, is the saying that sometimes people, and this is a common saying, they miss the forest for the trees. You know, there's so much life to the forest, to even Lake Lawson, Lake Smith. I mean, you can go there, Lake Lawson, Lake Smith, having never been there before. And if you've just got your foot down, you're just walking forward, you may not notice, you know, some of where the butterflies are. I mean, for example, like I knew where the major locations were. As soon as you got there, there's some right there on that tree. But you go within the park, and they're hidden in places that I didn't expect. So, kind of talk about that. And how you got in touch with the city of Virginia Beach and why Virginia Beach for this project.
Um, One is that as an artist, you're trained to look at things carefully. And when I have taught, I've often told people when I'm teaching them to draw that just to put down their pen or their pencil, and I want them to just look at it. And then I want them to take their finger in the air and go around the shapes that they see, and then decide exactly which are the positive shapes and which are the negative shapes, which leads to looking more carefully. And the same thing is what scientists do. Scientists and artists have a lot in common because we're looking to portray or see the things that other people don't recognize. And they're right in front of you. And a lot of life is like that too. I used to tell my students that frequently, if you pause and ignore what's nipping at your ankles and look at the horizon, you might come up with a better solution than to just kick away whatever is there. So when I was I can't remember whether I got a call or whether a friend told me that there was a call for environmental works in Virginia Beach, but I had done a large one at iPark about 6 or 7 years before, which is in East Haddam, Connecticut. And it's a 450-acre private park that is now, and they have every 2 years, they have a small group from the entire world. They select 6 or 7 people to do installations dealing with environmental issues. And it stays there for about a year to 14 months. And it was just a marvelous experience. I had already done prior installations, but basically, I think I had been recommended by Joanne Paradis to Nina Goodale, who got in touch with me. But I did go through the formal application process. But in my case, they could see what I had already done. And since this is Parallel Migrations 25, there were already pieces that I had done in Berlin, Germany, and I had done in other states. And I had actually done one at the Edith Wharton estate in the Berkshires of Massachusetts. And for artists who are applying, it's it's in a way you're auditioning regularly. And very seldom does someone get to be the lead actor their first time out. And the same thing happens with large installations. They keep growing and growing and growing, because when you do large ones, it involves a lot of people and sometimes some major equipment. And so let's look at the next slide. And the next slide, I'm going to ask you to think back to all those butterflies that died in Mexico in the snowstorm. In, I think it was 2003, I had my first residency, and it was at the Weir Farm Trust, which is a national park which is dedicated to an artist. And I got there in December. Uh, a few days after I got there, there was a major snowstorm, so I was snowed in, and I was cutting out butterflies for some two-dimensional installations when the whole pile fell on the floor. It was 2 o'clock in the morning, and I look at them falling on the floor, and I see all this snow coming down. So the next morning, I took some of my butterflies, I put them in the trees. In some part of the time, it was still snowing lightly. And so I created some works that related to climate change, related to the deforestation in Mexico and other parts of this country, and it put it in a different context so that the butterflies were frozen in time. And once I did one, well, then I had to do another one. And so these versions of parallel migrations, subtext perilous journeys, have been doing on and off. But if you look at what I'm doing, you can't just go and say, oh, I'm going to do a variation of this, because these are very fleeting installations. You have to keep your eye on the weather reports. You have to find a location. Where I live now, I can't just go out and do it because it's a condo association. And in this case, I had very neighbors who knew me. So they were not surprised when at 5 a.m. I was out there with ladders and lights trying to photograph something before the squirrels ran through and left footprints, or before the snow melted. And so that the work begins to take on new dimensions. You get a sense of the journeys, you get a sense of the dangers, and you get a sense of the fact that you don't always have control over what happens. And there is another one. And if you look to the right, you're going to see that there's a sculpture in front of the ocean with butterflies in front of it. And this relates to another news story. Folks in Arizona and New Mexico for decades have been placing markers in the deserts with the verbiage no olvidado, which means not forgotten in Spanish, and it marks where people have died without identification. At the same time, there was an article in the Times, and there we go. Sorry about that, I forgot to click. So here you can see one of the markers, and they're now being used globally in some cases due to all of the devastating deaths of migrants as they've been crossing other desert borders. But about a year or two later, there was a really disturbing article about field fires, and people who grow up where are large farms know that periodically certain fields are burnt. Legally, in those states, you have to have bullhorns at different locations to alert workers that they have to leave the fields before you set it on fire. This didn't happen. And so about half a dozen workers were they burned to death. I was thinking about it. I was thinking about the butterflies. And so I had a residency coming up in northwestern New Jersey. And there were these big fields, and they were still brown. It was in March. And it was the perfect place to put a whole group of these sculptures. And I purposely did it so that you didn't see them lined up. You realized that some of them were hidden back there. They didn't know where they were going to be. And so they became sculptural, very transitory installations. Most of them are just exist, except for the ones in the Lake Lawson and I Park and the Wharton Estate. A lot of them are there just while I photograph them. And then I decided to take the butterflies and put them on several of these sculptures and tuck them in another corner of this field. So Field Fire then incorporated the loss of butterflies and the loss of human life. By this time, most of you have figured out that one thing begets another, and certain sculptural elements, certain concepts. So at this point, I started doing uh, installations along the shores of New Jersey in towns that mirrored those where uh, there had been the deaths of immigrant workers who had been brought from China across around the base of South America, and then they would be transferred to smaller boats before they were left off in different parts of New York, New Jersey. And the problem was that some Coast Guard boats were approaching the traffickers, and they threw all these men overboard in February. Now, the ocean in February is really cold, and some of these men were drowned and washed up on the beach, and some were found wandering through the towns, obviously no idea where they were going or what they were going to do. So I created quite a few more of these sculptures. They started out with about 18 when I was photographing them here. And then I now have about 48, which means, like the installation at Lake Lawson, I have usually I hire people, but in some cases, the college may have some sculpture students who are really uh, excited to work with me and install these so that they can get a sense that all of my things are about conversations, and most of them also are now collaborative. When you look at these, um, you don't see footprints. You don't see how they're standing up. So engineering and thinking about what's on the horizon, it's not just, oh, I'm going to stick something here. It's how am I going to engineer this so that I can get groups of them up. There's uh, no evidence of what happened. There are no footprints, no boats, no people. So most of these ocean installations get done. Oh, and I wasn't on it. Sorry about that. Did I show you this one? Okay, there we go. Most of the ocean installations are done in either very late spring or mid fall during the middle of the week. And more recently, I've also, because there have been so many people over the last 5 years, I'm now doing the sculptures with Not Forgotten in 6 different languages, because so many people are washing up on beaches in Italy and Greece and France So I wanted to recognize them. Here, you see nature helping out because you really have to be patient. You've got to be at the right place at the right time. And I'm keeping track of the tides, the wind. I'm keeping track of the time of day. So which direction will I get shadows? So here, I also decided I had seen something along one of the beaches where they were doing some dredging and they had these police line do not cross. And I thought about the fact that they had used some of those to block off areas with the story about the original migrants being thrown overboard. And then a very gentle wind came along, not so gentle actually, and one of these sculptures fell over. There are bases which I engineered and construct. And so we dig holes, put the base in, then put the sculpture in, then put sand there. And we have to make sure that it's close enough to the surf that eventually the surf will come up and it will smooth it over, but not so much that I'm polluting the oceans with these washing out to sea. So there, on more than one occasion, we have been racing out to grab the sculptures before they do go out to sea. Um, and once in a great while, some of these have moved indoors. And you can see the shadows are important, the movement back and forth. In this case, I've introduced life preservers, which those men didn't have, but which a lot of the migrants and immigrants who were washed up in Europe do have. Unfortunately, they didn't function because the people who sold them the life preservers didn't give them ones that actually were life preservers. They were just filled with polyester foam, so they actually caused the drowning. So then I decided that the life preservers also could become elements, sculptural elements. And so here you see one being washed around on this beach. And there are some people down along the shore who very graciously in the off season let me literally sort of mark off an area and do these installations, which invite a lot of conversations with fishermen, passersby, and that's what the work's about. The work is getting people to look at it so and think about their life stories. What's happened to them? How did they get to this country? Or who in their family has recently immigrated to this country? And this is a quick look at picture of me looking less than glamorous, hoping that that wave and the ones that are going to come don't knock me over. So I'm always wearing waterproof Italian ski gear, as a matter of fact, that I've gotten from some discounters so that I'm not freezing to death when I'm doing this.
Was gonna say that wave was right there. It's
That is
like the
all,
jaws in the background, sort of a thing.
yeah, every once in a while I have gone down. And I have a sister who was with me one time and she was getting really worried. And she said, well, she said she has an injury and she said, I can't run after you. I said, don't worry, the fishermen will do it. And she said, what do you mean? I said, frequently, especially in the late fall, there's a group of fishermen, uh, usually retired. And one time I started to run after something and I realized that this man was running after me. And I said, can I help you? He said, no, can I help you? He said, when we saw you, we had to take a vote as to who was going to throw down their fishing pole and come over and scoop you out of the ocean. So periodically, when I'm talking to her, she lives in Ohio, and she says, how's it going? I said, well, there's always one kind soul who realizes that they don't want to be a witness to watching me wash out to sea. Everything has a story and it's never boring. Um, on some of these, actually, I have made maps for people to follow. And so there's one, a scrap of one from Berlin, Germany, one from the Vermont Studio School, a bit of a map from the La Selva Biological Research Station, and then another one from an area in France where I did the installations. Oh, but did I show all these? I'm forgetting
Oh,
to.
that's what I was getting excited about seeing next. That looks a little close to home.
Yeah, there you go. Some of those are closer to home. Uh,
So that's parallel migrations 25 right there in Virginia Beach, isn't it? Or is that at a different location?
no, Vermont Studio was one of the
Vermont.
earliest
Okay.
ones. La Selva was when I was in the rainforest in 2000, 2001, 3, etc. France, I was in 2009 or 10, and then Germany was 2014. But the next one is 2018. This was very similar to the one that folks are going to go see. And this was at the Edith Wharton Estate in Massachusetts. So what I'm doing here, you can see, now this was at the opening. I'm not usually looking quite this elegant when I'm dragging the ladders through the forest, but you can see the clusters of butterflies going up the sides of the trees. They weren't as high as Virginia Beach. Virginia Beach wanted them higher, but the Wharton Estate is gated and closed at night. So I think that that's the difference. And here you can see a little cluster tucked into some rocks along the trail. And the trail there at the Wharton Estate was quite lengthy also, not quite as extensive as the one at Lake Lawson. But I always tuck them into little corners or underneath the where the branches, the crook of the branches and the tree trunk. And there's always some sort of focal point. And as you mentioned at Lake Lawson, there were two trees, one at the beginning, one at the end, that were just really filled with butterflies until the hurricane came and decided to take it away. Here, there was a wicker bench covered in butterflies that people could pause at. The detail here, oh, you have to remind me to keep clicking. Okay, we did that one. We did this one. So there's the
There
wicker
you go.
bench. Uh, and that has also most of these things get repurposed and upcycled. So all of the butterflies, regardless of what condition they're in, they get moved on to the next location. Up until 2.5 years ago, 95% of them were presentable and they just needed a little bit of puffing and a couple extra butterflies. The past two installations, the one at the Wharton Estate, and that was only up for 4 months, and this one at Lake Lawson was significant damage because of the major variations in temperature, winds, hurricanes, humidity, which means that I really will have to think about how to reposition how I do these, that more of them may be indoors. I put this in because the early ones, where most of the butterflies were installed at eye level, on the back of the butterfly, there were snippets of different New York Times stories about things that were happening to insects, to butterflies, to people as they traveled around the world. And for those people who want to know, where I work, this is one of my studios. And this is when it's looking presentable. Okay. Twice a year, we have open studios when the public can come in. And this open studio was in April of 2019. And so what I did was I set up several tables, which I have done before in different locations, so that folks could come in, they could talk about migrations, they could talk about immigration, they could talk about why they like the butterflies. They could also just get off their feet, but in the process, they were cutting out butterflies, which I have pre printed. And the paper is archival and the inks are archival. So I'm no longer printing them all myself. They're all done with commercial inks, which you can't do, for instance, in your private studio. You have to be on site where you have commercial printers do it so that you don't asphyxiate people. So here's the studio all ready, and may see in the back that some of the framed photographs of field fire are there, and lots of butterflies and trays so people know where to put them. And this final slide shows a photograph on the right of a cut-a-thon. These events are called cut-a-thons, and as I said, they're all over, and people are invited to cut out butterflies and have conversations. And all these butterflies migrate to another location. Uh, and here are parents and children who came out to Lake Lawson in August 2019. At the top, this was the card for Afero Galleries in Newark, where I have a fairly large studio. And then down here was when I did a project at Tempelhof Airport, the old Tempelhof Airport in Berlin, Germany, that is now a park as well as a residential area. And that airport is where the blockade of Berlin was broken by US and British forces who were either landing there or dropping food down for the people when the Russians were trying to take possession of the entire city. Eventually, they only had East Berlin, but now East and West Berlin are together. So when I was there, I had an installation in at the edge of the airport in a container which had glass doors on one side so that it looked out onto the airport and the old runways. And it also had community gardens. For this event, people were cutting out the butterflies inside where the exhibition was, but also I was working with school children for several days. And as usual, so some people came and they were talking about how grateful they were that the US and Britain saved them after the war or during the war. They were talking about how many of their family members had passed away or how they had survived. But also, it was a big immigrant neighborhood. So you had all these people from Turkey who had been brought in after the war. And now you had a lot of children from other parts of the world who were moving into the same area. If I cannot tell you um, how exhilarating it is to know, to get so many people to feel comfortable telling you their stories, and to also realize, and I'm the coal miner's granddaughter, and I never met my grandfather. He died when my father was 12 years old in a coal mining town. And to know that where I am is because of where and how my ancestors got here. And that all of these other people all over the world essentially want the same thing. They want sanctuary, they want safety, and they want an opportunity for their children to grow. And we want the same thing for the butterflies. So this last slide, folks can go to earthday.org, what we can do to protect the monarch butterfly. And incidentally, they have a lot of other articles relative to all the things we've talked about. And then also my website, where if you haven't seen enough of my work, there is plenty more for you to see. And I thank you for giving me time to share all this. It's been a wonderful experience. And I appreciate everybody on the staff. Uh, I appreciate the volunteers. I appreciate all how everybody comes together to make these types of events possible.
And thank you for sharing, Anne. That's a very you're very good at, like I said, looking, you don't miss the forest for the trees, you see through the forest. And I think you've done a great job in explaining that to people. And it's just really powerful how you share the stories of everything from the smallest frog up to huge global migration and environmental issues. So I really appreciate you joining me. As you know, we have a Earth Day Art Walk coming up at Lake Lawson, Lake Smith, at 4 p.m. on April 22nd. It's a free public event. So if you go to vbpublicart.org or Virginia Beach Arts on Facebook, you'll see the event info. But I wanted to ask you before folks go out to Lake Lawson, Lake Smith and experience your installation, um, what is it that you want them to take away from what they experience? What do you want them to look for? What should they look for?
What they're looking for, I used the monarch butterfly way before there was internet that was usable, way before you had National Geographic specials about the butterflies. I used it because it was so visible and that I thought it was such a good metaphor for so many different issues. So when people go, it's also very seductive. It's delicate, and yet one group of them has the strength to go 3,000 miles from the northern United States down to Mexico and overwinter there. And that resilience, I think, is something that we all need. However, as a parallel for people migrations, particularly in this country, I checked with my librarian about a week ago, and she dug out this information from the census that you and I don't have total access to. And it seems that only 0.6% of the people in this country are indigenous or have indigenous ancestry. The rest of us came here, and in so many places, so many people are just being wonderful to each other, particularly during the pandemic. And for people who live in cities where neighbors are making sure that their neighbor gets food delivered, or that an elderly person has somebody to talk to, even if it's just on the cell phone with a person who lives across the hall, or all of the folks who are helping out with food insecurity, or taking up collections to help people do things and doing it from their heart. And if we do that, I think that we will definitely be stronger. And we need that strength to deal with all of the effects of climate change. And the climate change is real. I saw it when I was listening to scientists in the rainforest. We know it from all of the damage that's been done in Texas, all the fields that have been destroyed, all of the crops and animal life. We need to make real efforts. I sound like an evangelical minister, but we really have to make real efforts to be our personal best and do what is the best for the environment. And it means we have to give up some things, but our children and grandchildren will be the richer. Thank you.
Well, I really appreciate the discussion today. And so just before I let you go, how can people learn more about you, your work, anything else you'd like to share?
Um, on one of the last images, uh, is my website, www.dushanko-Dobek.com. And that will give them a way to get in touch with me and also see some of my other projects. I am hoping that hopefully at least in the next 6 months, it will be possible for me to um, move new variations of parallel migrations to both indoor spaces and outdoor spaces, and also to share Artist in the Rainforest, which is involves some of this, but is essentially a recap of what I did when I was helping scientists in the rainforest, and how those efforts determine what we need to do as individuals, as families, as communities, and as a country to have a stronger, better life. So that's how they can get in touch with me.
Great.
And
Thanks, Anne. And just for those out there, before you go out and see it for yourself, Anne's kind of gone over the background of it, but we also have a gallery entry for it on our VB Public Art website. So if you go to VB Public Art, that's vbpublicart.org/gallery/parallel dash migrations. There's more information about the Virginia Beach project, and there's also a video from when Anne installed the project in August of 2019. So if you'd like to see some of how that process went, that video is available. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Anne, for joining us at Virginia Beach Cultural Affairs. And we look forward to sharing your project with the community for a long time to come.
yeah, I truly, really am so excited that it got this extended life, and that at a time when people really need the tranquility and peace of the forest, that it's going to be there for them.
Great. Well, thank you, Anne.